The war beast's roar split the dawn sky like a crack of thunder, and Garrett Stone knew he had about 30 seconds before the creature tore through the makeshift fence and trampled everything he had spent 3 years building on this cursed frontier homestead. The creature was massive, easily 20 feet long from snout to tail, covered in scales the color of forge-heated iron with spikes running down its spine that looked sharp enough to gut a man. Its eyes glowed amber in the pre-dawn light, and foam dripped from jaws that could swallow a cow whole. Garrett had heard stories about war beasts, the creatures that orc clans bred and trained for battle, but he had never seen one this close, and certainly never seen one this enraged. Behind the creature, running with a limp that suggested injury, was an orc woman. Even from a distance, Garrett could see the distinctive green of her skin, the athletic build that marked her as a warrior. She was shouting something in the guttural orc tongue, commands that the beast was clearly ignoring as it fixed its attention on Garrett's barn where his horses were screaming in terror. Most men would have run. Most men would have grabbed what they could carry and fled into the forest, leaving their homestead to be destroyed. But Garrett Stone had been a cavalry officer before he came to the frontier, and he had learned a few things about frightened animals in his time. This war beast was not hunting. It was terrified. He could see it in the way the creature moved, the jerky motions, the way it kept looking back at something beyond the tree line. The white foam at its mouth was not aggression but panic. Something had spooked it badly, and now it was running blind, destroying everything in its path. Garrett did not think. He simply moved, years of training overriding common sense. He stepped out from behind his water trough, directly into the war beast's path, and he began to sing. It was a song his grandmother had taught him, a melody without words that she claimed could calm any creature. He had used it on horses during the war, on cattle during drives, even once on a wounded bear that had wandered into his camp. His voice was deep and steady, cutting through the morning air with a rhythmic pattern that had no logic, but somehow made sense to frightened animals. The war beast faltered. Its massive head swung toward him, those amber eyes fixing on his face. Garrett kept singing, keeping his movements slow and deliberate as he walked forward. Behind the beast, the orc woman had stopped running, her mouth hanging open in what looked like shock. The war beast was breathing hard, its flanks heaving. Up close, Garrett could see wounds on its hide, deep cuts that looked like they had come from spears or arrows. Someone had been hunting it. The creature lowered its head, and Garrett could see the intelligence in those amber eyes, the calculation happening behind them. He was within touching distance now, so close he could smell the beast's breath like hot metal and smoke. He kept singing, extending one hand slowly, palm up in a gesture of peace. The war beast sniffed at his hand, and then, impossibly, the creature's head lowered further, pressing against Garrett's chest with a weight that nearly knocked him over. The beast was not attacking. It was seeking comfort. Garrett stopped singing and began to speak instead, soft words that meant nothing but were delivered in a tone that meant everything. He ran his hands over the war beast scales, feeling the heat radiating from the creature's body, finding the wounds that needed treatment. The beast rumbled, a sound that came from deep in its chest, and then it simply lay down at Garrett's feet, exhausted. By the ancestors. The voice came from behind him, speaking in heavily accented common. Even I cannot do that. Garrett turned to face the orc woman properly for the first time. She was tall, easily matching his own height, with broad shoulders and arms corded with muscle. Her skin was a deep forest green, and 2 small tusks curved up from her lower jaw. Her black hair was pulled back in a warrior's braid, and she wore leather armor that had seen better days. Blood stained one leg where she had been limping, and her dark eyes were wide with something between amazement and disbelief. "Your beast is wounded," Garrett said, keeping his voice calm despite his racing heart. So are you. The orc woman glanced down at her leg as if she had forgotten about the injury. Hunters, she said shortly. Human hunters. They tracked Ember for 3 days. I tried to lead them away, but they injured her and she panicked. She looked at the war beast, which Garrett now knew was called Ember, with an expression of such concern that it caught him off guard. She has never run from me before, never ignored my commands. I thought I had lost her. She was scared, Garrett said. He knelt beside Ember, examining the wounds more closely. These cuts are deep. They will need cleaning and binding, or they will fester. You would help her. The orc woman's voice carried suspicion now. Why would a human help an orc's war beast? Garrett looked up at her, noting the way she held herself, the tension in her shoulders that suggested she was ready to fight or flee at any moment. He recognized that stance. He had worn it himself when he first came to the frontier, expecting every shadow to hold an enemy. Because she is hurt and frightened, Garrett said simply. And because she is currently lying on my property, which means she is my responsibility. He stood, brushing dirt from his knees. I have supplies in my barn, bandages, salves, things that should work on her scales if they work on leather. The orc woman stared at him for a long moment. The sun was rising now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and in that light, Garrett could see the exhaustion etched into her features. She had been running for 3 days, protecting her beast, and now she was injured and out of options. My name is Karga, she said finally, of the Iron Ridge clan. This is Ember, my war mount and companion since I was 14 summers old. Garrett Stone, he replied, former cavalry officer, current farmer, and apparently now a beast healer. He gestured toward his barn. Come, let me help. Karga hesitated, and Garrett could see the conflict playing across her face. Orcs did not trust humans, not after generations of war and bloodshed. And human men especially were dangerous to orc women, or so he had heard. But her beast was injured and she was injured, and sometimes survival meant taking risks. If you harm her, Karga said slowly, her hand moving to the axe at her belt, I will tear this farm apart and you with it. Noted, Garrett said, and he meant it. He had no doubt that this orc woman could do exactly what she threatened. But I give you my word that I only want to help. Karga nodded once sharply, and then she moved to Ember's side, speaking in the orc tongue with a gentleness that surprised Garrett. The war beast rumbled in response, and then, slowly, painfully, Ember rose to her feet. The creature was limping badly, favoring her right front leg, and Garrett could see more wounds now that he had not noticed before. Getting Ember into the barn took patience and care. The war beast was wary of the enclosed space, and Garrett's horses were losing their minds with terror at the predator's presence. He ended up moving the horses to the corral outside, which they did not like, but which seemed preferable to sharing space with a war beast. Karga watched all of this with an expression that was difficult to read, something between suspicion and curiosity. Once Ember was settled on the barn floor, Garrett gathered his supplies. He had plenty of bandages, remnants from his military days that he had never quite been able to throw away. The salves were newer, things he made himself from herbs and animal fat, useful for treating cuts and preventing infection in livestock. He had no idea if they would work on war beast scales, but it was worth trying. Karga knelt beside Ember, one hand resting on the beast's neck in a gesture of comfort. Tell me what you need me to do, she said. Garrett blinked. He had expected her to watch suspiciously, perhaps to question every move he made. Instead, she was offering to help, to work alongside him. It was unexpected, and it shifted something in his perception of her. Hold her steady, Garrett said. I need to clean the wounds first, and it is going to hurt. She might thrash. Karga nodded and positioned herself at Ember's head, speaking in low, soothing tones in the orc language. Garrett began to work, using clean water and cloth to wipe away blood and dirt from the deep cuts along Ember's side. The war beast growled, a sound that vibrated through the barn floor, but Karga kept speaking, kept stroking the scales around Ember's eyes, and the beast remained still. The wounds were worse up close. Spear cuts, definitely, made by hunters who knew what they were doing. If these injuries were left untreated, infection would set in within days, and even a war beast could die from infected wounds. Garrett applied the salve liberally, working it into the cuts with gentle fingers. The salve seemed to work the same on scales as it did on skin, creating a protective barrier that would keep out dirt and disease. Binding the wounds was trickier. War beast scales were not like horse hide or cattle skin. They were harder, more inflexible, and Garrett had to improvise, using longer strips of cloth and tying them in ways that would not restrict Ember's movement but would still hold the salve in place. Karga helped without being asked, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she held bandages taut while Garrett tied them off. They worked in silence for nearly an hour, the morning sun streaming through gaps in the barn walls, dust motes dancing in the light. Garrett found himself acutely aware of Karga's presence, the way she moved with controlled strength, the care she showed for her beast. There was nothing monstrous about her, nothing savage. She was simply a woman caring for an injured companion, and that was something Garrett understood deeply. When Ember's wounds were finally treated, Karga sat back on her heels, exhaustion clear in every line of her body. "Thank you," she said, the words seeming to cost her something. "I did not think a human would help. I thought you would drive us away, or worse." "I am not most humans," Garrett said, beginning to pack away his supplies. "And you are not what I expected either." Karga's laugh was bitter. "What did you expect? A savage? A monster?" "Honestly, I do not know what I expected," Garrett admitted. "I have never met an orc before." "There are stories, but stories are often wrong." Karga was quiet for a moment, watching him. "You were military," she said finally. "I can see it in how you move, how you assess threats. Did you fight orcs?" "No," Garrett said. "My war was against other humans in the southern territories. It was brutal and pointless, and when it ended, I came here to find something different." He met her eyes. "I came here to build something instead of destroying things." Something in Karga's expression softened just fractionally. "I understand that," she said quietly. "More than you might think." Garrett wanted to ask what she meant, but before he could, Karga swayed slightly, her hand going to her wounded leg. The blood stain had grown larger while they worked on Ember, and Garrett realized she had been ignoring her own injury to care for her beast. "Your turn," Garrett said firmly. "Sit down before you fall down." Karga opened her mouth as if to argue, then seemed to think better of it. She moved to a bale of hay and sat heavily, her leg extended in front of her. The wound was on her thigh, a deep gash that had bled through her leather armor and the cloth beneath. It needed more than field treatment, it needed proper cleaning and stitching. "I need to cut away the armor and cloth to reach the wound," Garrett said, drawing a knife from his belt. Karga's hand immediately went to her axe, an instinctive response, but she forced herself to relax. "Do what you must," she said, her voice tight. Garrett worked carefully, cutting away leather and fabric to expose the wound. It was bad, but not as bad as he had feared. The spear had cut deep but had missed any major blood vessels. With proper treatment, it would heal cleanly. He cleaned the wound with the same care he had shown Ember, and Karga bore it in silence, though he could see her jaw clenched against the pain. "This needs stitching," Garrett said. "I have thread and needle, but I will not lie to you. It is going to hurt." "I have had worse," Karga said shortly. "Do it." Garrett had stitched wounds before, both on animals and on men during the war. He worked quickly but carefully, keeping his stitches small and even. Karga watched the ceiling of the barn, her breathing controlled, and she did not make a sound even though Garrett knew every needle prick had to be agony. When he finished, he bound the wound with clean bandages and sat back. "You are tougher than most soldiers I knew," Garrett said honestly. Karga looked at him, and for the first time he saw something like humor in her dark eyes. "Orc women are taught to bear pain in silence," she said. "It is considered weakness to cry out, even in childhood. I broke my arm once when I was 7, and I did not shed a single tear because I knew my clan would judge me for it." "That sounds like a hard way to grow up," Garrett said. Karga shrugged, a very human gesture. "It is the orc way. We must be strong because the world is harsh to us. Weakness is death." Garrett began putting away his supplies, considering his next words carefully. Outside, the sun had fully risen, and he could hear his chickens clucking in their coop, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded. His farm looked peaceful in the morning light, a stark contrast to the danger that had brought Karga and Ember crashing into his life. "You mentioned hunters," Garrett said finally. "Human hunters tracking you, are they still out there?" Karga's expression darkened. "Yes, 3 men, maybe 4. They have been tracking Ember for days, ever since we crossed the border into human territory. They want her scales, her claws, her teeth. War beast parts sell for high prices in human markets." Garrett felt anger rise in his chest. He had heard about the hunters who tracked and killed war beasts for profit, but hearing about it and seeing the results were different things. "They wounded her badly," he said. "They were not trying to capture her. They were trying to kill her." "Of course," Karga said bitterly. "A dead war beast is easier to harvest than a living one. And if they kill the orc who owns her, well, that is just one less savage in the world, yes." The pain in her voice was raw, and Garrett understood that this was not just about Ember. This was about a lifetime of being seen as less than human, as a monster to be killed or driven away. He thought about his own experiences in the war, the way his commanders had spoken about the enemy as if they were not people at all, and he felt a sick recognition in his gut. "They will not take her," Garrett said firmly. "Not while she is on my land." Karga stared at him. "Why would you protect us? You do not know me. You owe me nothing." "Because it is the right thing to do," Garrett said simply, "and because no one should be hunted like an animal." He stood, moving to the barn door and looking out across his property. "My land is posted against hunters. If they cross onto my property, they are trespassing, and I have every legal right to defend it. That includes defending anything or anyone on it." He could feel Karga watching him, and when he turned back, the expression on her face was complex, layered with emotions he could not quite name. Suspicion was still there, but so was something else. Hope, perhaps, or the fragile beginning of trust. "You would stand against human hunters for an orc?" Karga asked quietly. "I would stand against anyone who tries to murder an innocent creature on my land," Garrett corrected. "The fact that you are an orc does not change the basic principle." Karga stood, testing her wounded leg carefully. She winced but managed to put weight on it. "You are a strange human, Garrett Stone," she said. "I do not understand you." "That makes 2 of us," Garrett replied. "I do not understand why I am doing this either, but here we are." A sound from outside made them both freeze. Voices carrying across the morning air. Male voices, rough and familiar with violence. The hunters had arrived. Garrett moved to the barn door, Karga close behind him despite her injury. Through a gap in the wood, he could see 3 men approaching his property from the forest tree line. They were armed with spears and bows, dressed in the practical leathers of frontier hunters, and they moved with the confidence of men who expected no resistance. "There," one of them said, pointing at the barn. "Tracks lead right here. The beast is inside." "And probably the orc woman," another said. "We can take them both. War beast parts will fetch good money, but orc ears fetch bounties in some territories." Garrett felt rage surge through him, hot and fierce. These were not men defending themselves. These were killers, pure and simple, and they were discussing murder as casually as if they were planning a hunt for deer. He looked at Karga and saw matching anger in her eyes, but also resignation, as if she had expected this all along. "Stay here," Garrett said quietly. Keep Ember quiet. Let me handle this. Karga grabbed his arm, her grip strong enough to leave bruises. They will kill you, she said urgently. They are hunters and they are armed. You cannot face them alone. I am not facing them, Garrett said. I am talking to them. There is a difference. Before Karga could protest further, Garrett stepped out of the barn and into the morning sunlight. He made sure the barn door was closed behind him, and then he walked toward the three hunters with his hands visible and empty of weapons. Gentlemen, Garrett called out, his voice carrying the authority of his old military rank. You are on private property. I am going to have to ask you to leave. The three hunters stopped, surprised by his sudden appearance. The lead hunter, a heavy-set man with a scarred face, recovered quickly and smiled, showing teeth that had seen better days. Good morning to you, friend, he said in a tone that was anything but friendly. We are tracking a war beast that came through here, dangerous creature. You would have seen it, I think. Big, covered in scales, breathing fire and killing everything in sight. I saw no such creature, Garrett said calmly, and I would appreciate it if you left my property. You are trespassing. The second hunter, a thin man with cold eyes, laughed. Come now, friend. We saw the tracks. They lead right to your barn. The beast is in there, probably injured. We will just take it off your hands and be on our way. We will even give you a share of the profit, seeing as how you have been so helpful. There is nothing in my barn except my horses and my supplies, Garrett said, his voice hardening. And I am telling you for the second time to leave my property. I will not ask a third time. The third hunter, younger than the other two but with the same dead look in his eyes, moved to the side, trying to get a better angle on the barn. Garrett shifted to block his view, and the movement made all three hunters tense. You are protecting it, the lead hunter said, his smile fading. You are protecting an orc's war beast. Do you know what that makes you? A traitor to your own kind. It makes me a man who does not allow murder on his land, Garrett said. Now leave, or I will have the frontier marshal out here by nightfall, trespassing, threatening a landowner, attempted theft. Those charges will put you in prison for years. The hunters exchanged glances. They had not expected resistance, and they certainly had not expected a lone farmer to stand against them. But Garrett could see them calculating, weighing their options. 3 armed men against 1 unarmed farmer. The math was in their favor, and they knew it. We do not want trouble with you, friend, the lead hunter said, his tone shifting to something more dangerous. But we have been tracking that beast for 3 days, and we are not leaving without it. Now you can step aside and let us do our work, or you can get hurt trying to stop us. Your choice. Garrett did not move. Then I suppose you will have to hurt me, he said calmly, because I am not moving. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Garrett knew he was taking a massive risk, that these men might actually attack him. But he also knew that bullies often back down when faced with someone who refused to be intimidated. It was a gamble, and everything depended on whether these hunters were willing to add murdering a human landowner to their list of crimes. The standoff stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then, from behind Garrett, the barn door opened and Karga stepped out. She was limping, her leg freshly bandaged, but she stood tall and proud, her axe in her hand. Ember followed, the war beast moving slowly because of her injuries, but still imposing, still dangerous. The bandages on Ember's scales were bright white against the iron-colored hide, a clear sign of recent care. You want my war beast, Karga called out, her voice strong despite her exhaustion. Then you will have to go through both of us. And I promise you, hunters, I will take at least one of you with me before I fall. The hunters stared, shocked by the sight of an orc woman standing beside a human man, both clearly willing to fight. Garrett wanted to shout at Karga to get back inside, to stay safe, but he also knew that her presence changed the equation. 2 defenders, one of them an orc warrior with a war beast, against 3 hunters. The math was not so favorable anymore. You are making a mistake, the lead hunter said, but his voice lacked conviction now. That orc is an enemy. That beast is a threat to every human settlement in the area. The only threat I see, Garrett said coldly, is 3 men who have been told twice to leave my property and have refused. I am going to tell you one last time. Leave. Now. Or I will defend my land with whatever force is necessary. The hunters hesitated. Garrett could see them weighing their options, looking at Karga and Ember, looking at him, calculating whether the potential profit was worth the guaranteed fight. Finally, the lead hunter spat on the ground and turned away. This is not over, he called back. We will be back, and next time we will bring the law with us. They do not take kindly to orc lovers in these territories. Then they can take it up with me, Garrett said. But they will do it legally, through the courts, not by trespassing and making threats. The hunters disappeared into the forest, and Garrett stood watching until he was certain they were truly gone. Then, and only then, did he allow himself to breathe. His hands were shaking slightly with the adrenaline crash, and he realized just how close that had come to turning violent. Karga limped over to him, Ember following like a massive, scaled shadow. You are either the bravest human I have ever met, Karga said quietly, or the most foolish. Probably the latter, Garrett admitted. He looked at her, at the war beast at the barn with its fresh bandages and supplies scattered around. They will be back. You heard them. They will bring others, maybe the law, maybe just more hunters. You are not safe here. I am not safe anywhere in human territory, Karga said bitterly. That is why I was trying to get back across the border to orc lands when they found us. She looked at Ember, and Garrett saw deep sorrow in her expression. I thought if I could just get her home, she would be safe. But she is too injured now. She cannot travel for days, maybe weeks. Garrett considered this. His farm was isolated, a full day's ride from the nearest town, but that isolation went both ways. If the hunters came back with reinforcements, he would have no help, no backup. But he also could not just send Karga and Ember away. They would die in the wilderness with their injuries, or the hunters would find them and kill them. You can stay here, Garrett said, the words coming out before he had fully thought them through. Both of you. Stay until Ember is healed enough to travel. I have space, I have supplies, and I can keep watch for the hunters. Karga stared at him as if he had grown a second head. You would let us stay? An orc and a war beast on your farm. Do you understand what that means? If anyone finds out, you will be branded an orc sympathizer. You will lose everything. I already stood with you against those hunters, Garrett pointed out. The damage, if there is any, is already done, and I would rather risk my reputation than send you to your death. Karga was silent for a long moment, and Garrett could see her struggling with the decision. Trusting a human went against everything she had been taught, every experience she had had. But she was out of options, and they both knew it. Why? Karga asked finally. Why would you do this for me? For us? Garrett thought about his answer carefully. He could talk about duty, about what was right and wrong, about his belief that all living things deserved basic decency. But the truth was more complicated than that. He looked at Karga, at her green skin and her tusks and her proud bearing, and he saw not a monster but a person. Someone who loved her companion, who fought for what she cared about, who bore pain in silence because that was what her people expected. She was, in all the ways that mattered, not so different from him. Because I have been alone on this farm for 3 years, Garrett said honestly. And in all that time, no one has needed my help. No one has given me a chance to be better than what the war made me. You and Ember showing up, injured and frightened and in need, it reminded me that I still have something to offer, that I can still choose kindness over cruelty. He met her eyes. So I am choosing kindness, and if that makes me an orc sympathizer, then so be it. Karga's expression was impossible to read, but Garrett thought he saw moisture gathering at the corners of her eyes. She blinked it away quickly, maintaining the stoic composure her culture demanded, but the emotion had been there, brief and real. Then we will stay, Karga said quietly, until Ember can travel, and I will help you with your farm as payment. I am strong, even injured, and I know how to work. I will earn our keep. You do not have to, Garrett started, but Karga cut him off with a sharp gesture. I do, she said firmly. Orcs do not accept charity. We pay our debts. If you give us shelter and safety, then I will give you labor. That is fair, yes, Garrett nodded, understanding that this was about dignity, about Karga maintaining her sense of self-worth. That is fair, he agreed. Then let us get started. We have a lot to do if we are going to be ready in case those hunters come back. They spent the rest of that day preparing. Garrett showed Karga around the farm, explaining what needed to be done and where everything was kept. She absorbed information quickly, asking sharp questions and offering suggestions based on her own experience. Despite her injury, she insisted on helping with the heavier work, carrying water buckets for the garden and stacking firewood with an efficiency that impressed Garrett. Ember settled in the barn, too injured to do much but watch. The war beast seemed content to rest on the soft hay, and Garrett's horses gradually calmed down in the corral outside, accepting the predator's presence if not exactly comfortable with it. Garrett made sure Ember had water and food, improvising with cattle feed supplemented with some of his dried meat. He had no idea what war beasts normally ate, but Ember seemed grateful for anything. As the sun began to set, Garrett prepared dinner in his small farmhouse. It was nothing fancy, just stew made from vegetables from his garden and preserved meat from his stores, but it was hot and filling. He set 2 bowls on the rough wooden table, and Karga looked at him with surprise. You would eat with me, she asked. At the same table. Why would I not? Garrett asked, genuinely confused. Karga sat slowly, her movements careful because of her injured leg. In orc lands, humans are slaves if they are captured. They do not eat with orcs. They eat separately after the orcs are finished. I thought it would be the same here, but reversed. Garrett felt disgust at the thought. That is barbaric, he said bluntly. No one is a slave on my farm. We are equals here, or as equal as we can be given the circumstances. Karga picked up her spoon, examining the stew. She took a careful bite, then another, and Garrett saw surprise register on her face. This is good, she said. I did not expect a human soldier to know how to cook. Former soldier, Garrett corrected with a slight smile, and I had to learn. It was either that or starve when I first came out here. The frontier does not have many restaurants. Karga actually smiled at that, a small expression that softened her features and made her look younger. No, I suppose it does not. She ate in silence for a few moments, then asked, Why did you come here? To the frontier, I mean. You said you were a cavalry officer. That is a position of respect, yes. Why leave that to farm in the middle of nowhere? Garrett set down his spoon, considering how much to share. The war ended badly, he said finally. My side won, technically, but it did not feel like winning. I saw too much death, too much cruelty, and I realized that I did not want to be a soldier anymore. I wanted to build something instead of destroying things. So I took my discharge pay, bought this land, and came out here to start over. That is why you understood, Karga said quietly. When I said I came to build instead of destroy, you meant it the same way. Yes, Garrett said. I imagine we are not so different in that regard. Warriors trying to find peace. Karga looked down at her bowl. I was a raid leader, she said, the words coming slowly as if she was not used to sharing such things. In my clan, I led attacks against human settlements along the border. I killed humans, Garrett. Soldiers, yes, but also farmers who fought to defend their homes. I burned crops and took captives and did all the things that my clan considered honorable in war. She met his eyes. Does that change how you see me? Garrett thought about it honestly. He could condemn her, could point out the innocent people who had suffered because of those raids. But he also remembered his own actions in the war, the enemy soldiers he had killed, the towns his cavalry had occupied. War made monsters of everyone who participated in it, and judging someone for doing in war what soldiers always did seemed hypocritical. "It does not change anything," Garrett said. "We are both who we were, but we are also trying to be something different now. That matters more to me than what happened before." Karga looked at him with an expression that was difficult to define. Gratitude, certainly, but also something deeper, something that might have been the first stirrings of respect. "You are a very unusual human," she said. "I will take that as a compliment," Garrett replied. They finished their meal in companionable silence, and afterward, Garrett showed Karga to the small spare room he had built for storage. It was not much, just a bed and a dresser, but it was clean and dry and private. Karga looked at the room with surprise. "You have a whole room for guests?" she asked. "I built it thinking maybe someday I would have family visit," Garrett said. "It has not happened yet, but I suppose hope is hard to kill." He gestured at the bed. "It is yours for as long as you need it." "I will be in the main room if you need anything." Karga nodded slowly. She was exhausted. Garrett could see it in every line of her body, but she was also wary, still not entirely trusting of this situation. "Thank you," she said formally. "For the food, for the room, for everything. I will not forget this kindness." "You do not need to thank me," Garrett said. "Just rest and heal. That is enough." That night, Garrett lay in his own bed and stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. He had just sheltered an orc warrior and her war beast. He had stood against human hunters and made enemies who would likely return with reinforcements. He had upended his quiet, peaceful life in the space of a single morning, and he had no idea what the consequences would be. But when he thought about the alternative, about sending Karga and Ember away to die, he knew he had made the right choice. Whatever happened next, at least he could say he had chosen kindness when cruelty would have been easier. That had to count for something. The days that followed fell into an unexpected rhythm. Garrett woke each morning before dawn to tend to his animals and check his fields. Karga would emerge from the spare room shortly after, limping less each day as her wound healed, and she would immediately start working. She insisted on earning her keep, despite Garrett's protests that rest would be better for her recovery. She was strong, incredibly so. Tasks that would have taken Garrett hours to complete alone, Karga could do in half the time. She repaired the fence that Ember had damaged during her panicked run. She hauled water from the well with buckets that Garrett usually struggled to lift. And she weeded the garden with a determination that would have been impressive if it was not also slightly terrifying. But it was not just physical labor. Karga was smart, observant, and willing to learn. When Garrett showed her how his irrigation system worked, she immediately spotted inefficiencies and suggested improvements. When they worked together to harvest vegetables, she demonstrated techniques from orc farming that increased their efficiency. Despite coming from different cultures, different worlds, they found ways to work together that played to each other's strengths. Ember healed slowly. The war beast was docile with Garrett now, recognizing him as the source of food and comfort. He changed her bandages daily, applying fresh salve to the wounds and checking for signs of infection. Karga would sit with them during these sessions, speaking to Ember in the orc tongue with a gentleness that always caught Garrett off guard. The fierce warrior and raid leader, reduced to soft words and gentle touches for her injured companion. "She is your family," Garrett observed one evening as they tended to Ember together. Karga nodded. "I raised her from an egg," she said. "In orc culture, war beasts are given to young warriors as eggs and we raise them ourselves. Ember hatched in my hands when I was 14 and I fed her, trained her, grew with her. She is more than a mount or a weapon. She is my sister in all the ways that matter." Garrett understood that. He had felt the same way about his horse during the war, a mare named Stella who had carried him through battle after battle, until she took an arrow meant for him. Her death had hurt more than any human loss, and he had never quite forgiven himself for not protecting her better. "I am glad we could help her," Garrett said simply. As the days passed, Garrett found himself looking forward to Karga's presence. The loneliness he had grown accustomed to over 3 years faded, replaced by the simple pleasure of having someone to talk to work beside, to share meals with. Karga was not what he had expected from the stories about orcs. She was disciplined and hardworking, yes, but she was also curious and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard and made him laugh. They talked during their work, sharing stories about their pasts. Karga told him about life in an orc clan, the rigid hierarchy, the constant training for war, the way strength and honor were valued above all else. She spoke about her childhood, learning to fight before she could properly read, earning her place through trials that would have killed weaker orcs. It sounded brutal to Garrett, but Karga spoke of it with a matter-of-fact pride that he had to respect. In turn, Garrett told her about his life before the frontier. His childhood on a small farm not unlike this one, his decision to join the military to escape poverty, the years of war that had shaped and scarred him. He told her about the things he had seen, the friends he had lost, the reasons he had come out here to the frontier to find peace. Karga listened to all of it without judgment, and Garrett found himself sharing things he had never told anyone. "You regret it?" Karga asked one afternoon as they worked together to repair a section of his barn roof. "The war, I mean. Do you regret fighting?" Garrett hammered a nail into place before answering. "I regret what it made me," he said honestly. "I regret the person I became, the things I did, but I do not regret trying to protect people even if the cause was flawed. Does that make sense?" Karga nodded slowly. "Yes. I feel the same about my raids. I was protecting my clan, defending our territory, but I also hurt people who did not deserve it. The regret is complicated." "Exactly," Garrett said. He looked at her, noting how the sunlight caught the green of her skin, making it almost luminous. She was beautiful, he realized with a start. Not in the conventional human way, but in her own way. The strength in her features, the intelligence in her eyes, the grace in how she moved despite her size and power. He found himself staring and forced himself to look away before she noticed. But Karga had noticed. When he glanced back, she was watching him with an expression he could not quite read. There was curiosity there and something else, something that made Garrett's heart beat faster. "You look at me strangely sometimes," Karga said quietly. "As if you are trying to solve a puzzle." Garrett felt heat rise to his face. "I apologize," he said. "I do not mean to make you uncomfortable. It is just that you are not what I expected, and I find myself curious about you." "Curious how?" Karga asked, and there was a challenge in her voice now, as if she was daring him to be honest. Garrett set down his hammer and turned to face her properly. They were sitting on the barn roof, the afternoon sun warm on their backs, the frontier stretching out around them in all directions. It was a moment suspended in time, private and intimate in a way that made honesty feel necessary. "I find myself thinking about you when I should be thinking about work," Garrett admitted. "I look forward to seeing you each morning. I enjoy our conversations, even when we disagree about things. You make me laugh, you make me think, and you remind me that there is more to life than just surviving day to day." He paused, then added quietly, "I did not expect to feel this way about anyone again, let alone about someone so different from me." Karga was very still, her dark eyes fixed on his face. "That is dangerous," she said finally, "what you are describing, for both of us." "I know," Garrett said. "Humans and orcs are not supposed to feel this way about each other. We are supposed to be enemies, or at best, strangers who avoid each other. What I am feeling goes against everything my people believe." "And mine," Karga said. "In my clan, caring for a human would be seen as weakness, as betrayal. If I went home and told them I had feelings for a human man, they would exile me, or worse." Then maybe it is good that we are out here, Garrett said. Away from both our peoples, away from their judgments. Out here we can be whoever we want to be. Karga smiled, but it was sad. For now, she said. But Ember is healing. Soon we will be able to travel again. I will have to go back to Orc lands, back to my clan. And you will stay here on your farm. This is temporary, Garrett. We cannot forget that. Garrett knew she was right, but the thought of Karga leaving, of the farm returning to its previous loneliness, filled him with a sharp ache. He had only known her for a little over a week, but already she had become essential to his daily life. The thought of her absence was unbearable. What if you did not go back? Garrett asked quietly. What if you stayed here? Karga looked at him with surprise and something that might have been hope. I cannot, she said. My clan, my family, they are waiting for me. I have responsibilities, and you heard those hunters. Humans do not accept orcs living among them. I would be hunted, and you would be marked as a traitor for harboring me. Let them try, Garrett said with more confidence than he felt. This is my land, and I decide who lives on it. If you wanted to stay, I would protect you. We would find a way to make it work. Karga reached out and touched his hand, a gesture that was surprisingly gentle. You are a good man, Garrett Stone, she said softly, but you do not understand what you are offering. The hatred between our peoples is not something that can be overcome by one kind human and one grateful orc. The world would tear us apart. Then we would fight the world, Garrett said stubbornly. Together, Karga laughed, and it was a sound of genuine warmth. You are impossible, she said. And maybe that is why I care about you, because you believe in things that should not be possible. You care about me? Garrett asked, his heart beating faster. Karga's expression grew serious. Yes, she said quietly. I do, more than I should, more than is safe. When I look at you, I see someone who sees me as a person, not a monster. You treat me with respect and kindness, and you do not flinch from my appearance or my history. That is rare, Garrett. That is precious. And I find myself wanting to stay, even though I know I should not. Garrett squeezed her hand gently. Then stay, he said. At least for a while longer. Ember is healing, but she could use more time, and I could use more time with you. Karga looked at him for a long moment, and Garrett could see the conflict playing across her face. Fear warred with hope, duty fought against desire, and in the end, hope won. A while longer, Karga agreed, but only until Ember is fully healed. After that, I must decide what to do. That is fair, yes. That is fair, Garrett said, though his heart ached with the knowledge that this was temporary, that the happiness he was feeling was borrowed time. That evening they sat together outside the farmhouse, watching the sun set over the frontier. Karga had prepared dinner this time, using orc cooking techniques to make something that Garrett could not name but that tasted delicious. They ate in comfortable silence, and when Karga leaned against his shoulder, Garrett did not pull away. He wrapped an arm around her, feeling the solid strength of her body, the warmth of her presence, and he allowed himself to imagine, just for a moment, that this could last. 2 weeks after Karga and Ember arrived, the hunters came back. Garrett had been expecting it, checking the tree line every morning for signs of movement, but it still sent his pulse racing when he spotted them. There were more this time, at least 6 men, and they were not alone. They had brought someone in official clothing, a man who rode at the front of the group with the bearing of authority. Frontier Marshal, Karga said quietly from beside him. They were standing in front of the barn, and Ember was behind them, her amber eyes watching the approaching men with predatory focus. They brought the law. Garrett felt his jaw tighten. Then we will deal with the law, he said. Stay calm. Let me do the talking. The group approached, and the man in official clothing dismounted. He was middle-aged, with a weathered face and eyes that had seen too much of the frontier's harsh realities. He looked at Garrett, then at Karga and Ember, and his expression was carefully neutral. Garrett Stone. The marshal asked. That is me, Garrett replied. And you are, Marshal Thomas Reed, the man said. "These hunters filed a complaint with my office. They claim you are harboring a dangerous war beast and its orc handler. They say the beast destroyed property and killed livestock in the area, and that you refuse to allow them to eliminate the threat." "That is a lie," Garrett said calmly. "The war beast, whose name is Ember, was injured and frightened when she arrived on my property. She has not destroyed anything except a section of fence which has already been repaired, and she certainly has not killed any livestock. My animals are all accounted for." Marshal Reed looked at Ember, taking in the bandages still visible on her scales. "The beast is injured," he observed. "She was injured by those hunters," Karga said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was controlled but held an undercurrent of anger. "They tracked us for 3 days, trying to kill Ember for her scales and claws. They shot her with arrows, stabbed her with spears, and when she fled to this farm, they followed. Garrett Stone gave us shelter and treated our wounds. He violated no laws." Marshal Reed turned his attention to Karga, and Garrett saw recognition and calculation in the marshal's eyes. "You are the orc," he said. "Karga of the Iron Ridge clan, I have heard of you. You led raids along the border for years. There are people who want to see you hang for what you have done." "I am sure there are," Karga said proudly. "Just as there are orcs who want to see human soldiers hang for their raids on our settlements. War creates debts on both sides, Marshal Reed. But I am not raiding now. I am trying to get home with my injured companion. That is all." Marshal Reed was silent for a long moment, studying both of them. Garrett could not tell what the man was thinking, whether he was sympathetic or hostile. Finally, the marshal turned back to the hunters. "Did you provoke this attack?" he asked them. "Did you hunt this war beast into human territory?" The lead hunter, the same scarred man from before, shook his head. "We were defending ourselves, Marshal. That beast is dangerous and the orc is a known raider. We have every right to eliminate threats." "On private property?" Marshal Reed asked. "Without the landowner's permission?" The hunter hesitated, realizing the trap. "We were in pursuit," he said. "That gives us the right to cross property lines." "It does not," Marshal Reed said flatly, "and you know it. Garrett Stone's property is legally posted against hunting. You had no right to be here, and you certainly had no right to demand he hand over anything on his land." He looked at Garrett. "That being said, Mr. Stone, harboring an enemy combatant, even an inactive one, is problematic. The orc needs to leave human territory." "She will," Garrett said quickly. "As soon as her beast is healed enough to travel, another week, maybe 2, then they will leave and return to orc lands. I am simply providing temporary shelter, which is not illegal." Marshal Reed considered this. "No, it is not illegal," he agreed. "But it is unusual and will attract attention. There are people in the settlements who will not be happy about an orc living on a farm, even temporarily." "Then those people can take it up with me," Garrett said firmly. "But they will do it through proper channels, not by trespassing and making threats." Marshal Reed actually smiled at that, a small expression that suggested respect. "You are stubborn, Mr. Stone. I can appreciate that." He turned to the hunters. "Your complaint is denied. You will leave this property and not return. If Mr. Stone catches you trespassing again, he has my permission to defend his land by whatever means necessary. Am I clear?" The hunters looked furious, but they nodded. The lead hunter glared at Garrett with pure hatred. "This is not over," he said quietly. "Yes, it is," Marshal Reed said sharply. "Unless you want me to arrest you for threatening a landowner in my presence. Now go." The hunters left, disappearing back into the forest, and Marshal Reed turned back to Garrett and Karga. "You have made enemies today," he said quietly. "Those men are not the type to give up easily. They will look for other ways to get what they want, legal or otherwise. Watch your backs." "We will," Garrett said. "Thank you, Marshal, for being fair." Marshal Reed shrugged. "I do my job, nothing more. But Mr. Stone, a word of advice. What you are doing here, sheltering an orc, it goes against every instinct your neighbors will have. They will not understand and they will not approve. If you continue down this path, you will be ostracized at best, targeted at worst. Are you prepared for that? Garrett looked at Karga at the hope and fear in her eyes, and he made his decision. Yes, he said firmly. I am prepared. Marshal Reed nodded slowly. Then I wish you luck. You are going to need it. He mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Garrett and Karga standing together in front of the barn. That could have gone worse, Karga said quietly. It could also have gone better, Garrett replied. Those hunters are not going to give up, and the marshal is right. Other people will hear about this and they will not be happy. I should leave, Karga said, and Garrett heard the pain in her voice. I should take Ember and go now before I cause you more trouble. No, Garrett said firmly. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. You are not causing me trouble. Those hunters are causing trouble. Bigotry and hatred are causing trouble. But you, Karga, you are the best thing that has happened to me in years. I do not care what people think. I care about you and I want you to stay. Karga looked at him with wide eyes. Garrett, you do not understand what you are saying. If I stay, if we continue this, it will destroy your life here. You will lose your farm, your standing in the community, everything you have built. Then I will build something new, Garrett said. With you, if you are willing. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other for 2 weeks. But I also know that I care about you more than I have cared about anyone in a very long time. And if that means fighting the world to keep you, then that is what I will do. Karga's eyes filled with tears and she blinked them away furiously, but not before Garrett saw them. In my culture, crying is weakness, she said, her voice thick with emotion. But right now, I do not care. You make me weak, Garrett Stone. You make me want impossible things. Then let us be weak together, Garrett said softly. He pulled her close, and Karga came willingly, pressing her face against his chest. He could feel her shoulders shaking, could feel the tears soaking into his shirt, and he held her tighter, offering the comfort and acceptance she had been denied her entire life. They stood like that for a long time, two people from different worlds finding solace in each other's arms. Behind them, Ember rumbled softly, a sound that might have been approval or might have been contentment. The war beast settled down in the barn entrance, her amber eyes watching the tree line, guarding her human and her orc with equal dedication. That night, everything changed. Garrett and Karga sat together in the farmhouse, the fire crackling in the hearth, and they talked about the future. Karga explained that she could not return to her clan, not after staying with a human for so long. She would be seen as tainted, as weak, and her life would be forfeit. But staying in human territory meant constant danger, constant vigilance against those who would see her dead simply for existing. What if we left? Garrett suggested. What if we took Ember and went further into the frontier, found a place where no one knows us, where we could start fresh? Karga looked at him with surprise. You would give up your farm, everything you have worked for. This farm is just land and buildings, Garrett said. It is not what matters. What matters is building a life that means something with someone who matters. If that someone is you, then I will go wherever we need to go to make that happen. Karga reached out and cupped his face in her strong hands. You are the strangest human I have ever met, she said, but there was love in her voice, clear and undeniable. And I think I am falling in love with you, which is probably the stupidest thing I have ever done. Then we are both stupid together, Garrett said, and he kissed her. The kiss was tentative at first, both of them unsure how this would work given their physical differences. But then Karga's arms wrapped around him, pulling him close, and Garrett stopped thinking about differences and simply felt. She tasted like the spices from dinner, like warmth and strength and home. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. I have never kissed a human before, Karga admitted, her cheeks darkening with what might have been a blush. I have never kissed an orc before, Garrett replied, but I would very much like to do it again." Karga laughed, and the sound was pure joy. "Then do it again," she said. They spent that night talking and kissing and making plans for a future that seemed impossible, but that they were determined to create anyway. They would wait until Ember was fully healed, and then they would leave together. They would go deeper into the frontier, find unclaimed land, and build a new homestead where they could live without fear of hunters or judgment. It was a dream, fragile and uncertain, but it was their dream, and they held on to it with desperate hope. 3 days later, the hunters returned. But this time, they did not come with the marshal. They came in the dead of night, armed with torches and weapons, and their intent was clear. They were going to burn Garrett out and take what they wanted. Garrett woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of embers roaring. He grabbed his rifle and rushed outside to find the barn on fire and 6 men standing in his yard with weapons drawn. Karga was already there, her axe in hand, her face set in a warrior's fury. "You were warned to leave," the lead hunter shouted over the crackling flames. "But you did not listen. Now you pay the price." Garrett aimed his rifle at the man's chest. "You are burning down my home," he said, his voice cold with rage. "That is arson, attempted murder, and a dozen other crimes. The marshal will hang you for this." "The marshal will not care once we tell him we were defending ourselves from a war beast," the hunter sneered. "These frontier types always believe their own. You are the one who will be blamed, Stone. You and your orc lover." The words were meant to hurt, to shame, but they just made Garrett angrier. "Get off my property," he said. "Now, or I will shoot." The hunters laughed, not taking him seriously. That was their first mistake. Their second was moving toward Karga with their weapons raised. Garrett fired, his bullet taking the lead hunter in the shoulder and spinning him around. The other hunters froze, shocked that he had actually shot, and in that moment of hesitation, Karga attacked. She moved like lightning despite her healing leg, her axe cutting through the air with deadly precision. She did not kill anyone, but she left 3 men on the ground screaming with injuries that would take months to heal. The remaining hunters ran, dragging their injured companions with them, and Garrett and Karga were left standing in the burning yard. The barn was fully engulfed now, flames reaching toward the night sky, and Ember was trapped inside. "No!" Karga screamed, and she ran toward the burning building. Garrett grabbed her, holding her back with all his strength. "You cannot go in there. The roof is collapsing. Ember is in there." Karga fought against his grip, her strength almost overwhelming him. "I cannot leave her. I will not." But even as she spoke, a massive shape burst through the barn wall in an explosion of burning wood and flame. Ember, her scales smoking and her bandages charred away, stumbled out into the yard. The war beast collapsed, coughing and heaving, but she was alive. Karga ran to her companion, tears streaming down her face as she checked Ember for injuries. The fire had burned away most of the bandages and scorched some scales, but the wounds underneath had healed enough that infection was no longer a threat. Ember was injured but not dying, and that was enough. Garrett watched the barn burn, feeling something break inside him. 3 years of work, destroyed in minutes by men who hated what they did not understand. His supplies, his tools, everything he had built was gone. He should have felt devastated, but instead he felt strangely free. "We cannot stay here," Karga said, coming to stand beside him. Her face was streaked with soot and tears, and her expression was fierce. "Those hunters will be back, and they will bring more men. We have to leave now." "I know," Garrett said. He looked at his burning barn, at his farmhouse that would probably be the next target, and he made his decision. "Get Ember ready to travel. I will pack what we can carry." They worked quickly and efficiently, gathering supplies and loading them onto Ember's back. The war beast was weak but determined, allowing them to use her as a pack animal despite her injuries. Garrett took one last look at his farm, at the home he had built from nothing, and then he turned away. The past was burning, but the future was still waiting. They traveled through the night, heading deeper into the frontier where human settlements were rare and orc territories began. It was dangerous, risky, but it was also their only chance. By dawn, they were miles away from the farm, deep in wilderness that few humans ever explored. They found a clearing beside a stream, a place with fresh water and good sight lines to watch for danger. Ember collapsed immediately, too exhausted to move, and Karga tended to her with gentle hands and soothing words. Garrett set up a basic camp, using the supplies they had salvaged to create shelter. "We did it," Karga said quietly as the sun rose. "We escaped. We survived," Garrett corrected, "but we have a long way to go before we are safe." Karga looked at him, and despite the exhaustion in her eyes, there was also hope. "Together," she said. "We go together." "Together," Garrett agreed, and he took her hand. They spent 3 weeks in that wilderness clearing, living off the land and avoiding any contact with others. Ember healed during that time, her natural resilience allowing her to recover from the burns and the stress of their escape. Garrett hunted and fished, providing food, while Karga built more permanent shelter and scouted the surrounding area for threats. It was a hard life, harder than either of them had expected, but it was also strangely peaceful. Away from the judgment and hatred of civilization, they could simply be themselves. Garrett learned more about orc culture, about the songs and stories that Karga had grown up with. Karga learned about human customs, about the small rituals that Garrett observed without even thinking about them. They were building their own culture, a blend of both their backgrounds, and it felt right. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Garrett asked the question that had been weighing on his mind. "Do you regret leaving with me? Do you wish you had gone back to your clan instead?" Karga looked at him, and her expression was serious. "I regret nothing," she said firmly. "My clan would have exiled me for caring about a human. They would have taken Ember from me and given her to another warrior, someone more loyal to orc traditions. I would have spent the rest of my life being judged and found wanting." She reached out and took his hand. "With you, I am free to be who I am. I can love a human without shame. I can build a life that makes sense to me, not to my clan. That is worth everything I have lost." Garrett squeezed her hand gently. "I feel the same," he said. "I lost my farm, my place in human society, everything I thought I wanted. But I gained you, and that is worth more than all of it combined." Karga leaned over and kissed him, a gesture that had become familiar and comfortable over the weeks. "Then we are both where we are supposed to be," she said. They continued traveling, moving deeper into the frontier until they found what they were looking for. It was a valley, isolated and beautiful, with fertile soil and a river running through it. There were no human settlements nearby, no orc clans that claimed the territory. It was neutral ground, unclaimed and waiting. "Here," Garrett said, standing in the middle of the valley with Karga at his side. "We build here." Karga looked around, and Garrett could see the possibilities forming in her mind. "It is perfect," she said. "Far enough from both our peoples that we can live in peace, but with everything we need to survive." They began building immediately. Using the skills they both possessed, they constructed a home that was neither fully human nor fully orc, but a combination of both. The walls were sturdy and practical in the human style, but the roof was thatched in the orc tradition. The interior was laid out for efficiency and comfort, with spaces for both of them to pursue their interests. They built a shelter for Ember, large enough for the war beast to move freely but protected from the elements. The work was hard, exhausting, but it was also fulfilling. Every board they nailed, every stone they set, was a statement of defiance against the world that wanted them apart. They were creating something new, something that had never existed before, and they were doing it together. Weeks turned into months. Spring became summer, and their home took shape. They planted crops using techniques from both cultures, creating a garden that produced food in abundance. Garrett hunted and Karga fished, and together they preserved food for the coming winter. Ember recovered fully and began hunting on her own, bringing back game that supplemented their supplies. They were not just surviving, they were thriving. One evening, as autumn painted the valley in shades of gold and red, Garrett made a decision. He had been thinking about it for weeks, turning the idea over in his mind, and finally, he knew what he wanted to do. He found Karga working in the garden, harvesting vegetables for dinner. The late afternoon sun caught her green skin and made it glow, and Garrett was struck again by how beautiful she was, how right it felt to be with her. "Karga," he said, and something in his tone made her stop and turn to face him. "I need to ask you something." Karga set down her basket, her expression curious. "What is it?" Garrett took a deep breath, suddenly nervous in a way he had not been since he was a young soldier. In human culture, when two people love each other and want to spend their lives together, they have a ceremony. They make promises to each other in front of witnesses, and they commit to being partners in everything. "Marriage," Karga said, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Orcs have something similar. We call it the bond ceremony. Two warriors pledge their lives to each other and become a single unit in the eyes of the clan." "Yes," Garrett said. "Exactly. And I was thinking that maybe we could do something like that. Not a human marriage exactly, and not an orc bond ceremony, but our own version. A promise between the two of us that we are partners, that we choose each other every day for the rest of our lives." Karga stared at him, and Garrett saw tears gathering in her eyes. "You want to bond with me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Even though it will never be recognized by your people or mine." "I do not care about recognition," Garrett said firmly. He took her hands in his, feeling their strength, their warmth. "I only care about you, about us. I want to make this official in whatever way makes sense for us. I want to stand with you and make promises that we will keep for the rest of our lives." Karga pulled him close, burying her face in his chest as she had done that first night, but she was not crying from pain this time. She was crying from happiness, from relief, from overwhelming emotion that she had been holding back for months. "Yes," she said, her voice muffled against his shirt. "Yes, I want that. I want to be bonded to you, to be your partner in everything. I want to build this life with you officially, not just in practice." Garrett held her tight, feeling his own eyes sting with tears. "Then let us do it," he said. "Tomorrow, we will create our own ceremony, our own promises, and we will make it official." That night, they stayed up late planning. They decided to blend elements from both human and orc traditions, creating something that honored both their backgrounds while also being uniquely theirs. They would exchange promises at dawn, the time when night becomes day, symbolizing the merging of their two worlds. They would bind their hands together with cloth made from materials they had both gathered, representing their intertwined lives. And they would make their promises in front of Ember, their only witness, the creature who had brought them together in the first place. The next morning, as the sun rose over the valley, Garrett and Karga stood facing each other in front of their home. They had dressed in their best clothes, Garrett in a clean shirt and trousers, Karga in leather armor polished until it gleamed. Ember sat behind them, watching with intelligent amber eyes that seemed to understand the significance of the moment. Garrett spoke first, his voice clear and steady. "Karga of the Iron Ridge clan, I promise to stand with you in all things. I promise to protect you when you need protecting, to support you when you need support, and to love you every day for the rest of my life. I promise to honor your strength and your courage, to value your wisdom and your kindness. I choose you as my partner, my companion, my equal in all things. This I swear on everything I hold sacred." Karga's voice was thick with emotion when she responded. "Garrett Stone, I promise to stand with you in all things. I promise to fight beside you when danger comes, to build beside you when peace allows, and to love you with every part of my being. I promise to honor your compassion and your integrity, to value your courage and your gentleness. I choose you as my partner, my companion, my equal in all things. This I swear on my ancestors and on Ember, who brought us together." They bound their hands together with strips of cloth, Garrett's right hand and Karga's left, creating a physical symbol of their union. Then they kissed, sealing their promises with an intimacy that had become as natural as breathing. Ember rumbled, a sound of approval that vibrated through the ground, and both of them laughed, the tension of the moment breaking into pure joy. They were bonded now, not in the eyes of their respective peoples but in their own eyes, and that was what mattered. The months that followed were the happiest of Garrett's life. He and Karga worked together on their homestead, expanding their crops and their shelter. They faced challenges, certainly. The frontier was harsh, with dangerous predators and harsh weather, but they faced everything together. When wolves threatened their livestock, Garrett and Karga hunted them with Ember's help. When winter came early and hard, they huddled together for warmth and rationed their supplies carefully, making it through to spring without starving. They were not entirely isolated. Occasionally, travelers would pass through the valley, both humans and orcs, and they had to be careful. But they developed a system. When humans approached, Karga would hide with Ember, and Garrett would speak to them alone, claiming to be a solitary homesteader. When orcs approached, Garrett would hide and Karga would speak to them, claiming to be an exile making her own way. It was not ideal, but it kept them safe. But they also found allies. A human trader who stumbled upon their homestead, and seeing the obvious bond between them, promised to keep their secret. An old orc warrior, retired from her clan, who recognized Karga and chose not to report her location, understanding better than most why someone would choose love over tradition. These small kindnesses gave them hope that maybe, someday, their peoples could learn to see each other differently. A year after they had fled the burning farm, Karga told Garrett she was pregnant. The news was shocking. Neither of them had been sure if a human and an orc could even create a child together, but also wonderful. They spent the next months preparing, building a nursery and gathering supplies for the baby. When their daughter was born, she was perfect. She had Garrett's eyes but Karga's skin tone, a shade somewhere between green and tan that was uniquely her own. She had tiny buds where tusks would eventually grow, and her ears were slightly pointed. She was a blend of both her parents, a living symbol of what was possible when two peoples chose love over hatred. They named her Hope, because that was what she represented. Hope for a future where humans and orcs could coexist, where differences were celebrated rather than feared. Hope that their love could create something beautiful and new. Ember adored the baby, treating Hope with the same gentle care she showed Karga. The war beast would curl around Hope's crib at night, keeping her warm and safe, and Garrett was amazed by how this creature that had once seemed so dangerous was now the most devoted guardian he could imagine. Life continued to unfold in their isolated valley. Hope grew strong and healthy, showing characteristics from both her parents. She was as curious as Garrett and as determined as Karga, with a stubborn streak that often left both of them laughing in exasperation. She learned to speak both common and the orc tongue, to appreciate both human stories and orc legends. She was truly a child of both worlds. When Hope was 3 years old, something unexpected happened. Marshal Reed appeared at their homestead, riding alone and unarmed. Garrett and Karga were immediately on guard, but the marshal raised his hands in peace. "I am not here to cause trouble," Reed said. "I am here because I have news that affects you." They invited him inside cautiously, and Reed explained. The frontier had been changing. More and more humans and orcs were finding reasons to work together, to trade and communicate rather than fight. The old hatreds were not gone, but they were fading, especially in the younger generations. And there was a movement starting, a push to recognize partnerships between humans and orcs as legal and valid. "It is not law yet," Reed said, "but it is being discussed in the territorial legislature, and I thought you should know because if it passes, you would not have to hide anymore. You could live openly as a bonded pair." Garrett and Karga looked at each other, barely daring to believe. "Why are you telling us this?" Karga asked. "Why do you care?" Reed smiled. "Because I have been a marshal for 20 years, and in that time, I have seen a lot of hatred and violence between humans and orcs. But I have also seen, in you too, what is possible when people choose differently. You did not let the world tear you apart. You built something beautiful despite all the obstacles. That matters. That is worth protecting and supporting." Before Reed left, he met Hope, and the sight of the little girl clearly moved him. "She is amazing," he said quietly, "and she is the future. Maybe not in my lifetime, but in hers. I think the world will be ready for people like you." After Reed left, Garrett and Karga held each other, both crying with relief and hope. They had survived so much, sacrificed so much, and finally, it seemed like the world was starting to catch up to where they had been all along. The years passed. Hope grew into a bright, strong young woman who inherited the best qualities of both her parents. The laws changed, slowly but surely, and eventually, human-orc partnerships were recognized. Garrett and Karga's homestead became a place of refuge for other mixed couples, a safe haven where they could learn and grow without fear. Ember grew old gracefully, her scales fading from iron to silver. She lived to see Hope become a young woman, and when the old war beast finally passed peacefully in her sleep, both Garrett and Karga mourned her as the family member she had always been. They buried her in the valley, on a hill overlooking the homestead, and planted a tree above her grave. Garrett and Karga grew old together. Their hair turned gray, their bodies slowed, but their love never diminished. They sat together on the porch of their home, watching the sunset over the valley, and they talked about their life with deep satisfaction. "You ever regret it?" Karga asked one evening, echoing the question Garrett had asked her so many years ago. "Do you ever wish you had chosen the easy path?" Garrett took her hand, their fingers intertwining automatically after decades of practice. "Never," he said firmly. "Every moment with you has been a gift. Every challenge we faced was worth it. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I would choose you again every single day." Karga smiled, the expression lighting up her aged face. "Then we are both fortunate," she said, "because I feel exactly the same way." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, two people from different worlds who had built a life together against all odds. Their story was not a fairy tale. It had been hard, dangerous, and full of sacrifice, but it had also been beautiful, meaningful, and full of love. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Their valley homestead stood as a testament to what was possible when people chose love over hatred, hope over fear. It was a place where humans and orcs could meet and talk and learn from each other. Where children like Hope could grow up knowing that their mixed heritage was not a burden but a gift. Where the old hatreds could be set aside in favor of building something new. Garrett and Karga had not changed the world overnight. But they had changed their small corner of it, and that was enough. They had lived their lives with integrity and courage, and they had proven that love could bridge even the widest divides. As the stars came out over the valley, Garrett and Karga remained on their porch, hands clasped, hearts joined. Two people who had found each other against impossible odds and had built something beautiful together. Two people who had tamed not just a war beast, but their own fears and prejudices. They had chosen each other, and in doing so, they had chosen hope. And that choice had made all the difference.